Today we're going to read Rapunzel. Once upon a time, long ago, there lived a man and his wife in a little house that overlooked a beautiful garden. This was no ordinary garden, for it belonged to a sorceress that was feared by all in the land. In this garden, the sorceress grew the finest fruits, vegetables, and herbs, and she surrounded it with a high wall to protect it. Nobody ever dared to enter it. One day, while looking out her window, a woman saw the tastiest looking Rapunzel growing so fresh and green in the sorceress's garden. Being that she was with child, she craved the Rapunzel. Day after day she refused to eat, but instead she stood by the window longing for the Rapunzel. Her husband grew worried because the wife became weaker and weaker as the days passed. Finally he asked her, "My dear, what is the matter? Why will you not eat?" She replied, "I don't feel like eating anything except the Rapunzel from that garden. I feel as though I will die if I don't get some." When the husband heard this, she knew he had to bring her some. He loved his wife very much and would do anything for her, even if it meant entering the sorceress's garden. That evening the man climbed the wall and grabbed a handful of Rapunzel. But just as he was about to escape the garden, the sorceress suddenly appeared. "How dare you take from me like a thief? You shall pay for this," said the sorceress. The man pleaded with her, "Please, my wife is growing weak and will surely die if she doesn't have the Rapunzel from your garden. I beg of you, please have mercy. She is with child and needs to eat." Upon hearing this, the sorceress thought for a moment. "You may have all the Rapunzel in my garden on one condition. You will give me your daughter when she is born. I will care for her as if she were my own." Though the man did not want to agree to this, he felt as though he had no choice, since he feared losing his wife. Soon after the child was born, the sorceress came and took the baby to raise her as her own. She named the baby Rapunzel. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful girl, and when she turned 12, the sorceress shut her up in a tall tower in the middle of the forest, far away from everyone. This tower had no doors or stairs. It only had a little window high at the top from which Rapunzel could look out. When the sorceress came to visit her each day to bring her food, the sorceress would call up to Rapunzel and say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." Rapunzel would wrap her long golden braid of hair around a hook and then drape it down to her mother below, so she could climb the tower and enter. Nobody except the sorceress visited Rapunzel. As a result, she became very lonely. To pass the time, Rapunzel would spend her days looking out the window and singing. A few years had passed when a prince happened by on his way through the forest. Rapunzel's beautiful voice caught his attention, and he knew he had to meet the girl who won his heart. The prince rode into the forest every day to listen to Rapunzel singing. He was determined to come up with a plan so he could meet her. One day, while sitting under a tree and listening, he saw the sorceress come up to the tower and watched her call up to Rapunzel. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." At that moment, the prince knew the way to get up the tower to meet the girl with whom he fell in love. That evening, after the sorceress had left, the prince called up to Rapunzel, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your golden hair." And to Rapunzel's surprise, she met the prince and fell in love with him as well. Night after night the prince returned, knowing the sorceress would not approve of anyone visiting the tower. They kept their meetings a secret. This was a big risk they were both willing to take. Being so in love, they wanted to be married. So the two planned for Rapunzel's escape from the tower. But before they could carry out their plan, the sorceress had found out about the prince. In her anger, the sorceress came up with a plan of her own. She grabbed a pair of scissors and cut off Rapunzel's braid. Then she took Rapunzel to a land far from the tower and left her there alone to fend for herself. The sorceress then made her way back to the tower and waited for the prince. That evening, when the prince called to Rapunzel to let her hair down, the witch let down Rapunzel's braid that she had cut. Not knowing it was a trap, the prince climbed Rapunzel's golden locks. When the sorceress surprised him at the window, she pushed him, and the prince fell hard into the thorny bushes far below. This tragic fall left the poor prince blind. Heartbroken over losing Rapunzel, the prince wandered the land for years and years, blind and living only on berries and roots. But despite his state of despair, the prince never gave up searching in hopes to find his one true love again. Meanwhile, Rapunzel found ways to survive on her own in the wilderness. She had since given birth to twins and was able to find food and shelter for herself and her babies. However, she still longed to be with her prince. In her sadness, she often cried herself to sleep, yet she never gave up hope. Then one day the prince happened upon the place far away where Rapunzel had been taken that night. The sorceress had banished her from the tower. When he heard the songs of a voice he once knew and loved, he followed the beautiful sound until he made his way to Rapunzel. She knew at once it was the prince and ran into his arms. Rapunzel was happy to see him. She wept. As she cried, two of her tears fell into the prince's eyes, and he was able to see again. The prince led Rapunzel and his new family back to his kingdom. The couple was married at once, and they all lived happily ever after.